Hi, I'm Katie Gaultney. Some of you may have remembered me as Katie Thorne. I graduated from Saks in 2003, and now I'm a senior correspondent with World News Group. After the birth of my third child, I started to feel like while the work that I was doing was, work that I really enjoyed, I wasn't really using the gifts and talents that the Lord had given me for His kingdom. And so I started to think, how can I use my gift of writing to further His purposes? And I got to thinking about one of the internships I had in college. One of my favorite professors was the editor of World Magazine, a man by the name of Marvin Olasky. And while I was in college, he gave me a chance to drive around the country and write articles for his bi-weekly Christian news publication. But felt more drawn to public relations at the time. However, in 2015, I sent him an email and just said, hey, Marvin, kind of off the cuff, I'm interested in getting back into journalism. And he emailed back right away and said, well, actually, Katie, there's a presidential forum on faith this weekend in Plano. So if you're interested, you're welcome to go cover it. And so I kind of jumped back in with both feet. So now I write for the magazine, and I also contribute to their daily news podcast, The World and Everything in It. They'll cover the major news topics of the day, racial unrest, Middle East peace deals, those kinds of things, but they'll do it through the lens of a biblical framework. It's a great resource for believers to just sharpen, what we know about the world that God's put us in. And then there's also World Radio, which began with the daily news podcast, The World and Everything in It. It's a 30-minute daily news podcast. It is so well produced. A lot of people call it, our listeners love to call it Christian NPR. And some of them joke and say, no, NPR is secular world radio. World journalists have been trained to say, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And so we look at things from a biblical framework, and that informs everything we do. I think about something that my husband says, we're in Texas, so he says, the Christian bootmaker doesn't have to carve an ichthus on the boot for you to know he's a Christian. He just has to make an excellent boot. And I think about that as I've been, in various careers, from public relations, speech writing, parade planning, to now journalism, which I love. The way to, shine God's light in a fallen world is not necessarily to, feel like you're having to evangelize every single day you're in the office. It's being excellent at what you do. And that excellence draws people in. It's winsome. And when we are focused on, Colossians 3:23, that, everything you do it for the glory of God, not for man. That Galatians 1:10, that, who am I seeking to serve? Am I now seeking to serve God or men? When we are focused on glorifying God in what we do, others take notice. When I think about, how Saks has sort of stayed with me over the years, I think about an analogy that I heard the other day. A mom had been told that her kids were sheltered, that they were in a bubble. And she got to thinking about that, and she said, they're really not sheltered. They're not in a bubble. They're in a greenhouse. They're in a place where their roots can grow deep. And that's one of the things that I think that Saks really impacted me with, is just a strong spiritual foundation, so that I was ready to face the world and everything it had to throw at me. The culture will try to bend your ear and get you to buy into the prevailing philosophy of the day. But when we know that the Bible is the source of absolute truth, and there was no doubt in my mind leaving Saks that was true, then you have a steady and firm foundation. When I think about people who had a big influence on me at Saks, how can I choose? There's dozens. I feel like every teacher I ever had, and even those I didn't have, but who I was in their orbit, had a positive impact on me. But when I think about journalism in particular, of course I have to say Pam Luttrell. She really fostered a love of writing and gave me some of the tools that I needed to know for the, I had never heard of what a lead was or what a nut graph was, and Pam taught us all that as the journalism teacher and yearbook sponsor. Bruce Burroughs was the principal at the time that I was in high school at Saks, and when he found out that I was interested in journalism, I think my mom mentioned to him when I was a freshman, Katie kind of thinks maybe she wants to be a journalist, and man, he sure did set me up for success. He gave me the tools I needed to create the yearbook and gave me training that I needed for that. He was all for us starting up the Revelation and provided all the resources we needed to make that happen. And I just really felt like he was behind me every step of the way. And as a child, as a young adult, that means so much to know that the adults around you are for you and they want to equip you with what you need to be all that God has called you to be.